welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week we are continuing our discussion of the PlayStation 3. So we're going to talk a little bit about some other stuff we wanted to hit that we didn't get last time. And then we're going to talk about some games. So Mike, tell us about the yellow light of death.
The yellow light of death, Tyler. So obviously we had the red ring of death on the old Xbox 360. Pretty popular error. You know, if errors can be popular, this one would be in the yearbook. Okay. Well,
Sure
PlayStation had theirs from the PS3. It was the yellow light of death. And according to an investigation by the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, the main cause of failure on the PlayStation 3 was a defect that was in the welds on the motherboard. So if you remember, the Xbox 360 had this problem too, where their solder didn't work. Yep. Same kind of malfunction. And the crazy part about this one is it didn't matter how long you ran the PlayStation 3 for. Just usually 6 to 12 months after the warranty expired, the system went kaput.
Convenient.
Yeah, the yellow light turned on. And the yellow light specifically, by the way, it's actually called a, let me scroll down to it here. I have the correct terminology. It is the, it's what it's called is security mode. That's what it is doing, is it's going into security mode. So the story behind it is Sony, a lot of solders had lead in it when you solder a board. And they're like, we're going to do our solder made of pure tin, you know, because they had a whole thing like, let's get rid of lead in the welds. It's actually a law.
Oh, yeah. It was a law, right? So Microsoft probably did the same thing.
Yeah. So they all went with these tin solders. And what ended up happening is that it was a temperature issue where pure tin required a much higher temperature to stay set. And the RSX did not have that temperature it needed. And what ended up happening is slowly over time, it would just corrode. Regardless of whether or not the system was on or off, it would just corrode away over the years. And that's what ended up happening. And then once the contact was lost with the board, that's when your PlayStation 3 was like, oh, butts, we need to go into security mode. And it would go into security mode. And that's what the yellow light of death was. And you could fix it. But a lot of times, if you fixed it and you didn't do a good job, it would shorten the life of your system, no matter what you did. So they offered replacement consoles at Sony, and just like Microsoft did, they were trying to be really good about it. And they had like free home delivery and all sorts of stuff to try to fix it. But it really didn't get fixed unless you bought a later console generation. Like the Slims, those ones were good. You know, anything, because what they ended up doing was they actually did a modification to the cell processor and the RSX and how they go into the console itself, and that essentially fixed the problem. But yellow light of death was pretty big. It's pretty big, not as big as red ring, obviously, but yellow light.
Well, I had both. I had a PS3 with a yellow light, and I had a Xbox 360 with a red ring.
So you had all the problems.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time, but I baked my PlayStation 3 in the oven to fix the yellow light, and it worked for like 6 more months probably.
Dude, make a little Sony snickerdoodle, I feel you.
Yeah, it was delicious. I did break because like you have to sort of cover all of the various like sensitive parts in like a, you know that kind of stuff that you use, like tack that you use to stick like posters to the wall without poking a hole in it, like that blue stuff.
Sticky tack? Yeah.
Sticky tack, yeah. So you have to like cover various pieces that like can't be 400 degrees with that sticky tack, and it keeps them insulated, I guess. And I got almost everything in there except for the speaker, the little beepy speaker that beeps when you turn the PlayStation on. And I missed the standard definition outputs. So after I was done baking my PS3, it didn't beep anymore when you turned it on.
Because the beeps were gone?
Speaker was, that's a really annoying beep. I'm totally okay with it.
You broke your PlayStation squeaker. Oh, that's upsetting.
I did. I broke a squeaker. And I couldn't hook it up to standard definition TVs either. So that's my story.
And you're sticking to it, and it's not a lie. That's just real life from Tyler. I have a question for you, Tyler.
Yeah.
You're a technical guy, you know? I always think of this guy as Mr. Technical. Could you, if you're having problems with this stuff on your PlayStation 3, and you had the technical know-how, could you just take it out of the case and repair it, and then like put it in another case where this wouldn't happen again? You know, like reorganize everything? People have had to have done that, right? Like a modding kind of situation. Modders had to do that, right?
I'm not familiar enough with how what the actual problem was, but I think it was very much related to heat, like just because the solder melts at a lower temperature than lead solder, so it was heating up, and that sort of like melts the solder over time and like allows for that corrosion you were talking about. So I don't know if a new case would necessarily do anything about that, because the heat is still there. Maybe better cooling might help, but
Or
I
get
don't
some of
know.
that sweet illegal lead solder that everyone's trying to talk about, which is
Well,
why I'm actually starting an illegal solder dealership business on the black market.
You should probably not put illegal in the name of the dealership.
I actually call myself Mr. Illegal's Lead Solder Co. Is that bad? Should I not do that?
Yeah, how's that business going for you?
I don't have a lot of customers. I got to change it. But that's the story of the Yellow Light of Death. Tyler, you're going to talk about... So, full disclosure here. Tyler had a PlayStation 3. I did not. This is probably the console I'm least familiar with, I would say, of the major consoles in my generation is the PlayStation 3. And it's not because I didn't try. I just didn't have the money to buy one. So we're going to go through the exclusive games that we feel are important to this generation, or Tyler has a special story of. And including, I think I have a couple I might have some special stories here too.
Oh, good.
So Tyler will talk about it, and then I have a couple of these games that I've actually played a little bit of and I'm excited to talk about, but this isn't going to be probably as detailed as our Xbox 360 or our Wii episode will be, because I am way more familiar with the Nintendo Wii. And I know Tyler is too, right? You're pretty familiar with the Nintendo Wii.
The PlayStation 3 is one I'm less familiar with as well, but I did have one in college. So I played a lot of the important exclusives, and so I can talk a little bit about some stuff. So let's talk about the first game on the list, and the reason it's the first game on the list is because it's kind of towards the top of the alphabet, and that's Demon's Souls.
Ooh, I've heard of this.
Yeah.
This is where Dark Souls came from, right?
It is. That's why it's very important, because it was a PlayStation 3 exclusive, and it had... It's basically, if you've played Dark Souls, like Demon's Souls is basically the same thing as that. But it's super, super hard. It's like a third person sort of action adventure. It's very, very hard. The combat is very, I think, deliberate is the best way to say it. It's not like, it doesn't feel fluid or like smooth, but every time you make a choice in, like, if you're going to swing your sword, or if you're going to block the shield, or if you're going to move or dodge or something, you are basically committed to that. And so you have to think very carefully about how you fight. And so that made a lot of the random encounters difficult, and also boss fights are super difficult for that reason. But what the coolest thing that this game does, that the Souls games do in general now, is when, like, wherever you want, you can leave notes for people. And Demon's Souls doesn't have any sort of traditional multiplayer as far as I know. Like, Dark Souls kind of had some invasion stuff going on, like they added some more like actual multiplayer, but Demon's Souls had this notes feature where you could leave notes for people and tell them about, like, traps that are up ahead or things like that. So as you're playing, you'll stumble upon these notes that other people have left. And then you can also watch the ghosts of other people when they died. So you can, like, see how they died and then be like, oh, there's a trap there. Maybe I should not go there. Which was a really cool form of multiplayer that I had never seen before in a game. I did not enjoy this game because it's too hard, and I am not good at video games.
Okay.
It's what
everyone should know. That's not true. Tyler's very good at video games. I've seen him play video games, and he's amazing.
Well, thank you, Mike.
I feel like you're a supportive Little League mom right now, and someone just said my son's not good at video games. I'm like, how dare you? Okay.
Well, I definitely did not play this game for very long because it has a difficulty that people have described as Nintendo hard, which is like, old NES games where they were so difficult, not because the actual, like, game was sort of difficult, although Demon's Souls was actually difficult, but it's a lot of memorizing. It's a lot of knowing, like, when to do stuff and, like, where the traps are and stuff like that. And I would find that every time I died, and it was just because I hadn't memorized it, I was just like, I couldn't do it anymore. I was very upset. I did have some roommates who really loved that, and they played through the whole thing, and they beat the heck out of this game, and they loved it.
So what you're telling me is it's like Demon's Souls is entirely like the Dam level and the NES version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Yeah, or like the hover bike level in Battletoads.
Oh, so that's just a double whammy of pain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, because I thought about getting Dark Souls games, and I was just like, I don't feel like I have that time to invest and memorize. Like, the brain space isn't there,
Yeah. Yeah, they're tough. I think some of the later ones feel a little better in the combat and stuff too. So I should check check those out. Dark Souls 3 is supposed to be pretty good. Same with Bloodborne. But the next game on the list here that I just want to touch on briefly because I really liked the idea, even if the game itself was not great, is Dust 514. Now, Dust 514 is like a first-person shooter, sort of Call of Duty, takes place in the future on futuristic planets because it's in the EVE Online universe.
This game,
are you familiar with EVE Online?
Yeah, I remember hearing about this. It was kind of big. It would be like you're a ground troop and players playing in space.
Yeah.
Would like give you orders, right?
Yeah, it's super cool. It didn't end up actually being that fun, and I don't think there was like a meaningful, like what I did in Dust didn't like meaningfully translate to anything cool in EVE proper. So it ended up just kind of being this mediocre multiplayer first-person shooter. But the idea was really neat of having two games that are in the same universe on different platforms, because EVE is on PC, that affect each other, right? Like that's a cool idea. I don't think it ended up working out too well, and I don't think the game servers are online anymore, but it was pretty neat.
Yeah, it said the game was actually cut off in 2016.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bummer, because this is a really cool experiment.
Yeah, it's a cool idea. I'm sad that it wasn't successful because I think it has kept other people from trying this similar idea, because I don't think the idea is bad. I think it was just poorly executed is all. But it's a neat game. I just wanted to touch on it real briefly.
Also, it was free to play. That's pretty big.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I don't think EVE was free at the time.
There's another free-to-play game on this list that was just PS3, and that is the Ace Combat. Did you see that? Ace Combat Infinity was a free-to-play PlayStation 3 exclusive. Oh
man,
yeah, it's pretty. It's a full Ace Combat game that was
awesome.
given away for
never
free.
Heard of it.
And then they had like a multiplayer mode. The multiplayer mode was not too much to be talked about. I read up about it a little bit while doing the research for this episode, and it looks really cool. And it even had a story mode, which you don't really get in free-to-plays. Free-to-plays don't really have story modes usually. Like they're usually, especially now. Usually. Now it's like free-to-play always means like multiplayer or MMO.
Yeah.
That's what you think when you hear free-to-play. But a free-to-play...
Well, yeah, because you... Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, like a free-to-play dogfighting simulator is crazy. Like that's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say games that are free to play now are often multiplayer because in a multiplayer game, the biggest asset that game has is its player base, and so making games free means there are more people playing. In a single player game, if it's free, that doesn't really make the game better for the other people who are playing. The next games on the list here, our list is in alphabetical order right now, so we're just going to continue going in this way, is the Gran Turismo series. There was Gran Turismo, well, first there was Gran Turismo Prologue, then there was Gran Turismo 5, Gran Turismo 6. Not a huge racing guy. I do remember it being kind of weird when Gran Turismo 5 Prologue came out, because it was like just a few hours of Gran Turismo 5, and there was all this like build up to when Gran Turismo 5 was going to come out, and it was like kind of made that exciting that they would sell like a game before the game. It was like $20, I think. But I never actually played them. Did you play these at all?
So I played Gran Turismo 3 with my brother, and then when we went to college, like we stopped getting PlayStation stuff. I had 360, so I never played these, but I do like the idea of essentially a demo that is enough to be a full game, so they can charge half price, like they did, like $20.
Yeah, I think it came out.
That's really
cool. It came out like a few years before too. It was like really, really early.
Hey, if your racing game's that good that you can release a $20 game before, then good for you.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
Prologue came out in 2008, April of 2008. Gran Turismo 5 Prologue. And then Gran Turismo 5 came out in 2010. So it was like 2 years later that Gran Turismo 5 came out. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah. That's big difference there.
Wow.
Big time lapse.
And Gran Turismo 6 also came out. If you like Gran Turismo, it's more of that. I am unfamiliar with Gran Turismo HD Concept, though. I gotta say. That's like a...
I don't know anything about that either.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's also a Gran Turismo game that came out.
Can I mention something on this list, too, that's kind of big? Are you going to mention the Eco and Shadow of the Colossus collection? Because that was big when it came out. I remember that.
Yeah, I've got like a section down here of like remakes.
Oh, okay. I will leave it be.
So, yeah, we can...
Just so everyone knows, we're going to talk about it, but now we're going to leave you in suspense.
That's right.
Ooh.
Another game that I want to talk about that is sort of near and dear to my heart, I'm skipping down a little bit because I don't want to go in alphabetical order, is MAG. MAG stands for...
MAG. I've heard of MAG.
Yeah, it stands for Massive Action Game, and it was a first-person shooter made by Zipper Entertainment, Zipper Interactive, the same people that made the SOCOM series on PS2. So like one of the first really popular games to play online on console, like it was the Halo 2 before Halo 2 on PS2. So the same people that made SOCOM made MAG, and MAG had, I want to say 256 players in the same game.
I remember this coming out. It was supposed to be crazy.
Yeah, it was massive. Yeah, 256 players in the same game, and the maps were massive, and they was really like 3 or 4 games being played at once because of just how many people there were, and like you can't meaningfully interact with all 127 other people on your team. But it was really, really cool. The gameplay itself was pretty fun. It was like take objectives, kill the enemies, that kind of stuff. But it also had a sort of meta game outside of it where you would pick a faction that you wanted to play for, and then you would sort of work through and unlock the stuff for that faction. But as you won matches, you would kind of take over that, like a faction would sort of take over the map, which was kind of cool. Yeah, it was just, but like the big thing about it is like 256 players in a time where I remember when Battlefield 2 came out and for PC, and it was like 64 players in one game. It was like, oh my gosh, that's so many people in one game. That'll never happen on console. And then Zipper was like, hold my beer, 256 players.
They're like, we can do this.
Yeah.
So it says they had to make a whole new server architecture to do that.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it, man. This game
sounds complex.
It was absolutely massive. The problem is just adding more people to a game doesn't really make it better. And so these 256 player matches were kind of rare that you would actually play in those because they had several modes that were fewer people. So like you have 32, 64, 128 player matches. And those ended up being more popular because I think you feel like you have more of an impact in a game with fewer players. Like if there's 256 players on the map, it's hard to feel like, oh, we won because I did a thing in that game, right? Or we lost because we didn't do a thing. It's like, it just feels like there's no real agency there that an individual player has. So it didn't end up being super fun, but like, man, having that many people in one game was awesome. Like just cool to think about.
Do you want to hear one of the saddest sentences I've ever read? And it's on the Wikipedia page for MAG.
Yeah.
On January 28th, 2014, the online servers for MAG were shut down. Due to its reliance on online play, it is no longer possible to play the game.
Man, maybe someday there's like some emulator folks that will get this going again.
I hope so. They can do it on PC. They have to be able to do it on PC.
Yeah. Man, that would be neat.
They could get it going.
Yeah, you and me. Let's get this game going again.
I would buy a copy of MAG for $5 somewhere and then figure out a way to play it on my PC. That would be fun. If people told me there was a community, I would do that. That just sounds awesome.
Yeah. Man. That was a cool game.
Great game. Great. I forgot about, I'm like remembering these games I would read about in like game news when I would read it in this time period, you know, because 2010, I was just graduating from college. This was like a big deal. Like I was really because I had my own job. I could buy my own video games. It was a big time for me. You know what I mean? So, oh boy.
Yeah.
Wow. Love it.
More games
Great shout out.
I was going to say Infamous on the PlayStation 3, and then I was going to name a game that was not Infamous. So now we're going to talk about Infamous. We're going to talk about the Infamous series. We got Infamous and Infamous 2, and then there was also a DLC for Infamous 2 called Festival of Blood. These were games.
What a scary name.
Yeah. Well, they were superhero games. So you basically played as a superhero. I think his name was Cole. I'm about to find it online so that I can tell you what this guy's name was. I'm pretty sure his name was Cole. Just
that sounds
Cole
like
McGrath. That's what I was going to say.
Wow, could there be more of an American protagonist name there? Cole McGrath.
Cole McGrath has electricity powers, and he goes around and does cool stuff in an open world and saves people, and it's super great. I didn't play too much Infamous, and I played zero Infamous 2, but the first one was pretty fun. I remember it like the electricity powers were so cool, and it was definitely one of those games with like an open world that you felt like you needed to explore everything. This was like sort of at the height of when open world was like the cool thing to do in games, and so every game that came out was open world. It was made by Sucker Punch Productions, who made the Sly Cooper series on PlayStation 2, and I think they would make a couple of Sly Cooper games on PlayStation 3 as well. But yeah, this was a cool game, and then the second one I think added more powers, more stuff to do. You can jump higher, and it was just like cool to be a superhero and fly around the city and do awesome stuff.
That's awesome. I remember the infamous Second Son.
Yeah,
That
for
came out
PlayStation
for
4.
PlayStation 4, and that is in Seattle.
Yes.
And my friends own a store in Seattle called Ugly Baby and LaRue. They were an Etsy store, and they became a store, like a real store, like an IRL store, if you will. And their store's in the game.
Oh, that's awesome.
They like a programmer put their their canopy sign of their store in the game. It's awesome. But yeah, that's how I know Infamous is when the Second Son game came out. It was in Seattle, and the developers just drove around Seattle and picked sites to put in the game.
That's awesome.
So it's so cool.
It also had a really cool cutscene style that was like comic booky, because they were really going after this like superhero motif. So there's like all the cutscenes were sort of comic book style, which was really cool and kind of different at the time, because I don't think other games around that time were doing the same thing.
I like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm really a big fan of superhero stuff that is non-Marvel or non-DC.
Oh, like mainstream.
Yeah, just because it gives you a little side note into another. You can explore more, I feel like, because it's kind of doing its own thing. And I really think I should have played these games as a person who was a fan of superhero stuff, just to try it out. Like, for example, one thing that I really love, and this is a movie, is the movie Chronicle.
Oh, I need to watch that still.
And that movie is an amazing, like, I guess, I mean, it's hard to say, and it sounds really nerdy to be like, what if a meteor landed and people got superpowers kind of movie? Like, what would happen in our world, essentially, instead of a superhero
Like, what if
world,
regular
like Marvel
people got
world?
superpowers and not
Yeah,
people
and
with
it's
strong
just
moral
like-
compasses?
Yeah, right. And I think this kind of falls in that same vein. And I'm honestly ashamed of myself that I've never played these games. I feel like I really should. I think I gotta get a PS4, and I'm sure there's backwards compatibility with these ones.
There's not, so I'm so sorry.
There isn't?
No, PS4 does not play PS3 games in any way, shape, or form,
Oh my
except for the ones that have been
goodness.
explicitly remade for it.
PS4, what
Dropping
are
the
you
ball.
doing
Yeah.
with your life?
Infamous also had a good or evil like karma path. So speaking of like good moral compasses, you could choose to be a good or evil person. So that makes things different, I guess.
So I'm going to be a good person because if I play evil people in games, I feel bad about myself
Yeah.
because it happened to me in KOTOR.
Yeah, been there.
And in Fable, too, my guy started growing horns, and I'm like, I don't want to be a guy that has horns. This just makes me sad.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Want to move on to the next game
Yeah.
since I'm sad now?
Yeah, next games on the list were Sony's, the original on PS2 was Sony's answer to Halo, and it's called Killzone. The first Killzone was on PlayStation 2. Killzone 2 and 3 were on PlayStation 3. I never played Killzone 2, but I do remember when Sony showed the PlayStation 3, one of the first times they showed it, they showed Killzone 2. And it looked amazing. The graphics were so good. It was so smooth and fluid and incredible. And they were like, this is what games are going to be like in the future. And we were all convinced because we were naive and hadn't been bamboozled before. Turns out the whole thing was a pre-rendered cutscene. Like they specifically made it for this event, and none of that stuff was actually in the main game, and it did not look like that either.
Whoa.
But they passed
That's
it off as if it was real gameplay.
That's downright unethical. I will say that much. You can't lie to people like that.
It was definitely not cool. And then when the game came out, it turned out to be it was a shooter. It's fine. I remember playing Killzone 3. And I think if you dig around on the internet, you might be able to find a review that I wrote of it. But
Really?
yeah, I'm not sure where it would be or if the website is still up.
Okay, you keep talking.
The
You
website
just
might
keep talking.
not be up anymore, so good luck. But I played Killzone 3, and I remember it being a fine first-person shooter that didn't do anything very special, but it was pretty fun, and the multiplayer was decent, and it wasn't too long, and it was all right. It's like super futuristic sci-fi. You kind of fighting in a sort of like the enemies are definitely like sort of remind me of like a futuristic version of like the Nazis. So like definitely bad guys, and it was like they're all evil bad guys. So we're just gonna kill them all, and that's how we're gonna save the world. But it was okay. It was worth playing. So that was cool.
I can't find the review.
Yeah, I don't even remember what the name of the website was, so it probably doesn't exist anymore.
Oh wow. So wait, you just said there were aliens, right?
Yeah. Well,
That's a big thing.
there were some aliens, but there were also some like humans that were futuristic, I think.
Future people.
Yeah.
Future people, when they get into they're just trying to kill you in games.
That's right.
Why can't they be nicer?
Yeah, but
Future people be nicer in games.
it's too bad. But this was made by Guerrilla Games, who would go on to make a little game called Horizon Zero Dawn for the PlayStation 4.
Oh, that's one of those games that I almost bought a PlayStation 4 for, and then realized I had no money and didn't buy one.
Well,
I do. That's a really fun game.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of those games where I feel like I could just watch someone play it.
Yeah, I need to play it. I have it sitting on my shelf, and I have never played it because it came out at the same time as Zelda Breath of the Wild, and it was kind of similar in like the itch that it scratched, and there's no way I was going to not play Zelda, so I never played it, but I need to.
Well, you know what you can do? You can wait until I come visit, and then I can watch you play.
Great. Let's do that.
Doesn't that sound fun? Let's get popcorn. It'll be great.
That sounds great.
Next game.
Killzone 3 also was the first game in the series to have 3D. Like, the PlayStation 3 actually had a 3D feature where it would, certain games that were made for it, and if you had like a 3D TV, you could play them in 3D, which I think is I don't want to say underrated feature because I don't rate 3D very highly, but it's a little known feature, I suppose. So this game was in 3D, which is like kind of neat if you dig that. I don't, but
I remember that. That was like a very small window there.
Yeah.
PlayStation really trying to push that, and it didn't really hit.
yeah, there's like 2 or 3 years where nearly every game came out had some sort of 3D features, and it must have been Sony going to these developers and being like, yo, can you put 3D? Because we're trying to be better than Xbox, and we know what the people want. The people want 3D. Turns out the people don't want 3D.
Yeah, look at the Nintendo 3DS. Like, a lot of people just turned the 3D off when they played that thing.
It also had motion controls.
It just hurt their eyeballs.
With PlayStation Move, they had their Wii competitor. So that was neat, I guess. But again, not that cool.
Yeah, not that cool.
So,
sorry, Sony.
Yeah, but that's Killzone 3. The Little Big Planet series of games is pretty important, I would say, to the PlayStation 3. 1, 2, and 3 are all on PlayStation 3. 3 is also on PlayStation 4. But
that's the little guy that's made a yarn.
Yeah, his
right?
name's Sackboy. And Little Big Planet is an adorable, like 2D side scroller made with this like kind of semi-realistic art style where it feels like everything is made out of cardboard and like it's like part of a little kid made this thing. And like Sackboy is adorable and all the like main characters are made out of yarn. But what was really, really cool about Little Big Planet was you could make your own levels. So that was like what the game was mostly about.
You could make your own levels?
Yeah, so yeah, it had the main game, which was fun and like fine platforming and like you play with your yarn dudes and Sackboys, great. But the real game was making your own levels. And man, you could do some cool stuff in Little Big Planet. And even in later Little Big Planet games, the like things you could do got so intense that there were people that made first-person shooter games out of the Little Big Planet tools. Which is like nuts to me. And they built computers, they built all kinds of stuff like within this Little Big Planet like engine that let them make their own levels. So there's like lots of really cool player generated content. So if you really like games where the players make the content like Super Mario Maker or like things like that, Little Big Planet is the series for you. And the third one is on PlayStation 4. So you should definitely play that. They also had Go-Kart, like a Mario Kart kind of thing, spin-off for Little Big Planet, which I think you could make your own levels, which is kind of neat. But the Little Big Planet series
I do like that.
Was pretty cool, and it's a PlayStation 3 exclusive, and it's really the only way you can play those games, and they're definitely worth playing.
Well, Tyler, you're big into the emulation.
Yeah.
If I'm correct. I just looked up the RPCS3 PlayStation 3 emulator. Is it good? Do you know? Have you used that before?
I haven't ever used it. I haven't been able to get anything to work on it, mostly because ripping your own PlayStation 3 games, because I would never download them illegally. Obviously, ripping your own PlayStation 3 games is kind of an involved and technical process and requires
so it's not as easy as just like putting the disc in.
No. You have to like mod your PlayStation 3, and then you have to go through the process to like rip your own games to your computer. But as far as I know, it works okay for some games. Like Persona 5, I think runs just perfectly flawlessly, which is sort of how that emulator got like popular, was because like, oh, we can play Persona now. Please donate to us, and people kept donating because they wanted to play Persona. And then they had to take all the Persona stuff off their website because Atlas made them, so they can't talk about how their emulator plays Persona super well. But it plays, there's some like Red Dead I think runs kind of okay. A lot of games run kind of okay. So I wouldn't say it's like ready for prime time in that sense. Like maybe there's a couple of games that you can play. I think Demon's Souls is one of the games that runs really well on it too. So if you want a way to play that, I think you can do that. So anyway,
So everyone should know.
It's cool, but it's not recommendable yet if you just want to play PlayStation games on your computer the same way Dolphin is if you wanted to play like GameCube games on your computer. So
I was gonna say you might as well just go to Craigslist or GameStop and get a cheap PS3.
If
that's the case.
Pick up a PS3 and play your games. But yeah, it's cool.
Good to know.
The next games that I want to talk about are some of my favorites of all time. I'm a huge Metal Gear Solid fan. And all of them actually all of them now. You can play every mainline Metal Gear Solid game on a PlayStation 3. Except for maybe the Portable Ops series, but you can play Metal Gear Solid 1 because PlayStation 3 plays PlayStation 1 games. You can play Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and Peace Walker as part of the Metal Gear Solid Essentials Collection. I think that's what it's called, or the HD Essentials Collection. So that's 2, 3, and Peace Walker. And then you can, of course, play Metal Gear Solid 4 because that's the only place to play Metal Gear Solid 4. And, little known fact, or maybe not, Metal Gear Solid 5 actually came out on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. So you can play Metal Gear Solid 5 as well on your PlayStation 3. So you can play the whole series on PlayStation 3 pretty much, except Portable Ops are technically canon, so I don't think there's a way to play those on the PlayStation 3, but otherwise you can play all the other games, and they're all great. Anyway, Metal Gear Solid 4 came out in 2008, which was 4 years after Metal Gear Solid 3 had come out on the PlayStation 2 towards the end of the PlayStation 2's lifespan, and Metal Gear Solid 4 is one of the greatest games of all time, and also one of the worst games of all time. Like, it's one of those games where it's like, man, if you let yourself get sort of sucked into the storyline and like all that stuff, like, man, you can have a great time. But if you're looking for reasons to not like it, like, it's campy, it's like a lot of stuff doesn't make sense, it's like just over the top ridiculous in some areas where it's like there's this, it's like this hyper realistic sort of military simulator, but then also it has vampires in it, kind of. And then also Raiden is like a kind of a machine now. He's more a machine than man.
Twisted and evil.
And he's like super emo in this one. But Metal Gear Solid 4 is one of the best instances of like fan service for any series because it has callbacks to every single important piece of Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. Like, it just perfectly encapsulates everything that is those games, and they lean in so hard to their storytelling style. So they have cutscenes all the time. There's way more cutscenes in that game than actual gameplay, probably. Like, there's 5 or 6 acts, and each act has like a 2-hour cutscene before the start of it. Like, no joke. There's incredibly long cutscenes. And they have like full play and pause functions and stuff like that. But man, it's so fun, and the gameplay is so fun too. It's a third-person shooter with a heavy reliance on stealth, but unlike some of the older Metal Gear Solid games, the game's not like necessarily over if you get caught, like outside of your stealth. And the first 3 games, like if you got caught, it wasn't over immediately, depending on your difficulty setting, but like you were gonna have a pretty hard time, and you probably couldn't get out of it if you got caught. In Metal Gear Solid 4. You definitely could hold your own. There was like tons of different weapons. There's a lot of really cool characters. Just, man, I love Metal Gear Solid 4 so much.
Also, it might have the coolest subtitle of any game.
Guns of the Patriots.
Yeah, that just sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Really like epic and like crazy. But can we go back a second?
Yes.
You said vampires. There's vampires in the game?
There is a vampire in the game.
I just never would have known that until tonight.
Yeah, he's a character from Metal Gear Solid 2. His name is Vamp, and he's like kind of a vampire.
They're not even trying at this point. They're just
no, but there's such good callbacks. Like later on, you meet again like characters that are from Metal Gear Solid 3, and Metal Gear Solid 3 takes place in like the 60s, and so Metal Gear Solid 4, which takes place in the far off future of 2014, take like. These characters are like old people now, basically, and they're in there being awesome and super cool. It like pulls everything back together, and there's some good twists in there that maybe like an older Tyler would have seen coming, but younger Tyler hadn't been like had seen this many twists in his life. And so there are some twists towards the end that like really just like blew my mind. Like I can remember like playing this game at my buddy's house, and I played straight until like 5 a.m. because once you get rolling on the last few cutscenes, they're hours and hours and hours long. But you just like you can't stop. And man, I just remember like got no sleep, getting in my car to drive home and being like, wow, what a fantastic experience. Anyway, that's my Metal Gear Solid 4 story, and I love it.
Dude, when I saw that was on the list, I was like, oh man, Tyler's gonna be so excited. It's like whenever we do these game lists and I see a Final Fantasy game or a Metal Gear Solid game or a Jaybird reference, I know you're gonna be excited, and that makes me excited. So thank you for sharing that.
You're
with
welcome. It's a shame Metal Gear Solid 4 never came out on any other platforms. There's no like PS4 remake. It doesn't run in RPCS3 emulator because I check that site all the time to see when they're going to make some Metal Gear Solid 4 progress, and it doesn't run yet. And so it's a real shame that there's no other way to play it other than just get a PS3 and buy the game, which is super cheap now. So
That's true. I was looking at some PlayStation 3s actually on Craigslist earlier today because I was like, there's so many games I need to play.
Yeah, and it's got to be pretty cheap now.
Yeah, the ones I saw, like Craigslist, they're selling them. It depends on what kind you get. Like you can get one of the really old ones for like $50, but then I get nervous about it breaking.
Yeah.
So,
but also like for $50, it's like, well,
that's true. You could risk it.
Yeah.
You could bake that in the oven. You could make a Sunny Snickerdoodle
That's
if
right.
you need to and keep that life going. So, next games are games that I don't know a lot about, but I know are very fun. And my friends that love PlayStation love these games.
which games are those?
They are Ratchet and Clank.
Oh man, we just got done talking about Metal Gear Solid 4, and now you want me to talk about Ratchet and Clank?
Oh, he's so excited. I'm ready.
Oh my gosh, Ratchet and Clank. So, Ratchet and Clank is a series that started on the PlayStation 2. I think we talked about the first 3 games or the first 4 games that are on the PlayStation 2. We talked about them at great length. I'm sure I got just as excited then as I am now. Ratchet and Clank on the PlayStation 4, there were a lot of them. There were Ratchet and Clank Future. There's the Future trilogy. So Ratchet and Clank Future, Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, which was a PlayStation Network exclusive, like you could only download it. A Crack in Time, All for One, and Into the Nexus. So Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, Crack in Time, that's the Future trilogy. And then there was Ratchet and Clank, All for One, and then Into the Nexus. Tools of Destruction was very standard Ratchet and Clank. They improved on the formula greatly, but it was like still very much just a Ratchet and Clank game. Very fun, very awesome. Same with Quest for Booty. It was a bit shorter because it was a downloadable game, and it focused on Ratchet figuring out a lot of stuff about his family, of like where he's from, because like he thought he was the last of the Lombaxes, I think, up to that point. So Quest for Booty, Tools of Destruction deals with a lot of that too, but I think Quest for Booty goes a little bit deeper. And then we get to the best Ratchet and Clank game ever, A Crack in Time. And the reason this game is so good is because you could play separately as Clank. All the other Ratchet and Clank games usually had separate Clank sections where you got to play as Clank, and those are fun. But the Clank sections in this game were like really puzzle based, and they were all like time sort of puzzles. So there's a lot of like time fast forwarding and rewinding to like solve these puzzles, and they were all really, really well done. Like they reminded me a lot of the Portal series, where you get into a room, you're like, not sure how I'm going to do this thing that I know I need to do. And then you start to sort of figure it out, and you start to try things, and you can make meaningful progress towards it. And then once you finally figure out what the solution is, you go, oh, that was so easy. I should have just done that from the start, right? Just so fun. Crack in Time is great. All for One was kind of a weird spin-off that was multiplayer focused. It was like campaign sort of co-op multiplayer focused. It wasn't super great. I don't know if it was made by Insomniac, so maybe that has something to do with it. And then there was also another one called Full Frontal Assault, which was like a tower defense game. And that one was also on the PlayStation Vita. And so in Full Frontal Assault, you had your classic Ratchet gameplay of guns and jumping and stuff like that, but you were also defending your base from bad guys that were coming in. So you would like set up turrets and like, in classic tower defense style, you would set up your towers and then you would defend them. And it was okay. It was not quite the gameplay I'm looking for in Ratchet and Clank game. Like I don't want the bad guys to come to me. I want to move through the bad guys. But it was okay. And then Into the Nexus was another standard Ratchet and Clank game. The thing about that was just short. It was like most Ratchet and Clank games had like 8 or 9 planets, and Into the Nexus had like 3 or 4, I want to say. So it was just really short, but it was great. It was very fun. And it was like $20, I think, when it came out too. So like, it wasn't trying to be a full game.
Well, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
That's great. So my question for you is, because the Ratchet and Clank game that came out for PS4, I want to say like a year ago.
Almost 3 years ago.
That was big. That was big, right?
Yeah, that was
a big deal.
That was a remake of the
one.
original, like the kind of trying to do the same storyline. That game is really fun too. I really, really, really enjoy that game. I think it's not quite as good as A Crack in Time, but it's probably second best.
So Crack in Time is the Tyler Osby recommendation.
Yes, Ratchet and Clank Future Crack in Time. So good. The Ratchet and Clank from a few years ago had a movie come out at the same time that was really bad.
Oh, I remember that.
Which is too bad because Ratchet and Clank could make a great movie, and it just didn't. So
sorry, Ratchet and Clank. Way to screw that one up.
Real bummer. But anyway, Ratchet and Clank series, love it.
No, I don't know anything about Resistance.
I don't know very much about Resistance either. The only thing that I really know is that the storyline is sort of an alternate future. Like, what if the United States lost World War I think is kind of the whole thing. And so there's like, I think they lose because the enemy has like some sort of formula. You know what? I should have done some research on Resistance because I really don't know that much about it. But anyway, that's kind of what it is. It's a first-person shooter. It's also made by Insomniac, the same people that made Ratchet and Clank. And it was a first-person shooter, like a realistic sort of first-person shooter with like some kind of cool gadgets and stuff from this alternate future. But I really don't know that much about it.
Oh, well, can I talk about something while you look it up? Because we actually have a game on this list that I need to talk about because I actually have some knowledge of this game.
Okay, let's talk about what you want to talk about.
And that's SOCOM 4, U.S. Navy SEALs.
I would love to hear about SOCOM 4.
I had a buddy of mine who was really into SOCOM. Like, he played it, like that was his game. Like the same way people played Call of Duty when it was really
big.
Because he loved third-person shooters. And this game was great. It was like a team, like when he played the team deathmatch mode, I would come over his house and I'd play it with him, and you could like put down traps, and like it was just really, it was a cool game. It's especially like because it had this level of, I guess, militaristic realism is what I'd call it, that not a lot of games of that war genre had on console. Like the only comparison I really compared it to, and it's still way more arcadey than this game because this game is so hardcore, is Arma, the PC game Arma. It was kind of as close to Arma as you could get, I think, on a PlayStation 3. And I would play it with my buddy, and it was super fun to just like to hand the controller back and forth. And it was a great game. And they stopped making them. They don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what happened. They just stopped doing this SOCOM series. And I thought it had a pretty good following, I guess, or audience. And there were people, because he would play SOCOM 4, and I think he'd even play SOCOM 3 still, and he'd go back to SOCOM 3, and people would still be playing it.
That's crazy.
Like, that just liked it, yeah. And this was, like, around the time, like, probably, I guess I would say 2014?
2014 is when it got shut down, it sounds like.
Yeah, 2013 then, probably. Yeah. It was, like, 2012, 2013 is actually probably when I was at his house playing it, because, yeah. But, yeah, it's a cool game. It's a really cool third-person shooter if you're into those kind of games. I was never into third-person shooters as much as first-person, so it was fun to kind of connect with my friend and hang out with him over this game.
Yeah, that's cool.
What I liked. And we tried to get Ghost Recon and play on live on Xbox, and he bought an Xbox and got Ghost Recon, and then we played it twice, and then I'm like, how come I never see you online? He's like, oh, I returned it. I just didn't like it. And he returned his Xbox 360 and his game.
Wow.
And then he just went right back to SOCOM.
He's like, you know what? I know what I like, and it's not Ghost Recon. It's SOCOM.
Yeah, he knows what he likes, and he returned. I think he got a refund on the console, but he definitely had to eat it for the Ghost Recon. It was the Ghost Recon Future Soldier or whatever it was called. Oh,
yeah, Future Warfare or Advanced Warfare.
Future Warfare. Yeah, that one, whatever that one was. But yeah, it was just so funny. So SOCOM's a cool game. I would recommend that if someone was like, I want to play a third-person shooter on the PS3, I'd be like, boom. Other than another game we're going to talk about that's third person, but not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a shooter. I'd call it a more of an exploratory Indiana Jones-esque experience. But we're going to talk about that in a second.
So want to quickly make a correction about Resistance because I obviously don't know a whole lot about this game. But the plot is basically like these aliens come and invade, and they like attach to humans and sort of make them evolve. And so like in Europe, there's like this race of like super evolved humans called the Chimera. And so they kind of take over everything. And I guess you're part of the Resistance. Haha, hence the name, right?
I see.
So yeah, so that's your goal in these games is to defeat the Chimera, who have sort of taken over the world, or at least Europe, by the first game. Probably by the third game, they've taken over the world, and you need to stop them.
Good sum up there, I think.
Yeah.
I remember people being into it. People like that game.
Yeah, I had a buddy who really liked it. I think I have a copy of it sitting on my shelf, but I never played it. So,
all right. Do you want to move on to Tales of Xillia? Did I pronounce that correctly?
I think so. These are another series of games I don't know a whole lot about. It's part of the broader Tales series of like sort of action-y hybrid JRPGs, very anime. I just know Tales of Xillia was one of the exclusives to PlayStation 3. I think it's still exclusive to PlayStation 3. There are some other ones like Tales of Berseria that was exclusive but isn't anymore. I think I want to say it was Tales of Berseria that like eventually came out on PC. But the Tales series is cool. I want to spend more time with these games. I'm afraid that if I try to talk about them at all, I will just say things that are horribly wrong, and I don't want any Tales fans to get mad at me.
Just for clarification, this does not include Tales of the Crypt, correct?
I don't think so.
And it does not include DuckTales.
No, they're parallel universes to DuckTales.
Then I am not interested, sir.
Okay.
Let's move on. The next game I have is Twisted Metal. It was a 2012. It wasn't really a remake. It was like them trying to kind of reboot the franchise, though, I think, or like get people into it again. And as I recall, it did not do well. And it bummed me out because the original Twisted Metals were great. They were super fun, absolutely ridiculous games that I loved. And I wanted to mention on here because they tried to bring it back and it didn't do well, but I felt like it needed a shout out.
Yeah.
Because it deserves a shout out. And those games like Twisted Metal 1 and Twisted Metal 2 World Tour, I think is what it was called or something like that. My brother and I played those split screen so much. So it's just good memories, fond memories. So wanted to throw that out there. But we need to talk now about the big heavy hitters, the ones that are not alphabetical because these are so big.
We added them
we just
later.
Need to go for it. That's right, because these ones are the ones that everyone thinks of when they're like, hey, I have a PlayStation 3. They're like talking about these games.
Yeah, a lot of these are, if you have a PlayStation 4, you should play them there instead because they got awesome remakes. The first series I want to talk about, the Uncharted series, which is super popular, maybe the most popular series on the PlayStation 3. I'm just like, that's just spitballing off the top of my head, like in terms of full-on series. They follow a character named Nathan Drake, who's like an Indiana Jones kind of dude. He's a bit younger, but he uncovers ancient paranormal secrets. And there's always some sort of love triangle going on in at least the earlier ones. I think later on he gets his love life sorted out. But
good for him.
The first 3 games are on the PlayStation 3, and they are all so good. They're third-person shooters with sections that have like sort of puzzles, almost Zelda-like puzzles, where you're always solving something to like open a tomb. I remember when it was first announced, because it looks so much like a Tomb Raider game, people were calling it Dude Raider because it's like Tomb Raider but with a dude. And yeah, Nathan Drake is like an incredibly charismatic, very fun character. He's going on adventures all the time with his buddy Sully, who's like an older man kind of father figure. And then he's also got his in the first game, she's his girlfriend, I think, Elena, sorry. And then the second game, I think, introduces Chloe, who's like there's like a sort of love triangle there. And then I think by the third game, he has figured his life out. So the love triangle is like not quite as big a thing, but they're all very, very fun. If you like third-person shooters and you like sort of puzzle stuff, they all have very fun stories. The first 3 are great. The fourth one, which I don't want to get too much into because we'll probably talk about it someday when we talk about PlayStation 4 stuff, but the fourth one has a really, really compelling, like the storyline. Like they upped the storytelling in that game so much that it's like it's worth playing the first 3. They're all great anyway, but like it's worth playing them just so that you have the context necessary to get everything out of the fourth game, because the fourth game is truly something special, I think, in terms of like gaming storytelling. So, yeah.
So play these 3 games.
Yes.
And then play the 4th one, and then send Tyler a letter.
Yeah.
Handwritten, being like, "Dearest Tyler, thank you for the recommendation in video games."
I'm glad to help.
That's what you should do.
This series is remade as the Nathan Drake collection on PlayStation 4. That's the way to play them. They run at 60 frames per second. They are like 4K, maybe only 1080p. I'm not sure, but they're higher resolution. I don't think the multiplayers from the 2nd and 3rd game are part of that collection, but I don't think anybody is playing those games online anymore. But I do remember the 2nd and 3rd game having decently fun multiplayer. Just like standard, like, let's run around the map and shoot each other, and maybe we'll be teams, and maybe there's capture the flag, but it was fun.
My buddy played the 3rd game multiplayer a little bit. He was into it.
Yeah.
Not too much, but it was fun.
Yeah. The next game that I want to talk about, I don't know if you've played The Last of Us, Mike.
This is my story. This was the story. Do you want me to tell my story?
Yes.
Or you want to talk about the game?
Please tell your
first?
story.
Okay. My friend let me borrow his PlayStation 3 and said, "You can play The Last of Us," because I'm like, this game, critical, hit. Everyone loves it. I got to play this thing. And then I was about a week into playing it, and I hadn't really had a lot of time on my hands, so I was only maybe like 2 hours in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking my sweet time.
Oh, yeah,
because
it's a good one to take your time with.
Yeah, yeah. And then my friend took his PlayStation 3 back.
Oh, no.
And I never finished it, and I never played any more of it. But I got kind of a revamped look at this game again, because when I worked in Los Angeles as a temp, one of the guys I worked with, one of the other temps, was so into the multiplayer mode in The Last of Us. And there is a community. Did you know that?
No. I mean, I knew it had
people.
multiplayer, but I didn't know anybody cared about it.
There is a community of people on Twitch that love this game and their multiplayer game. Not just the story mode, the multiplayer.
Huh.
And he called it T-Lao. I remember that. He would always call it T-Lao. And I'm like, wouldn't it be T-Lou if
T-Lou?
it was T-L-O-U?
Yeah.
But he called it T-Lao. And he loved it. And I remember he got in trouble because he would just watch it on Twitch all day. But yeah, it's this game, the story mode is just incredible.
Oh.
Like, it was just mind-blowing storytelling, and that's why I wanted to play it. But it also had a sizable multiplayer community too. I don't think it does probably anymore, because this was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
You know, but people dug it. People even dug the multiplayer. But yeah, you should tell what game we're talking about. It's The Last
so
of Us,
Last of Us
obviously.
came out towards the end of the PlayStation 3's lifespan, and it is a sort of a third-person stealthy action game, with, like, you're against zombies. But the main thing about this game is its storyline. I think it's probably one of, I don't want to say it's one of the best stories told in games, but it is definitely one of the best told stories in games, if that makes sense. The way it is, I mean, the story is very good on its own. I don't mean to discount the story, but the way they tell the story is like, it feels so cinematic, and it feels like you're watching a movie. It's like that level of storytelling, which I'm usually not a fan of, like saying a video game is like watching a movie, as if like movies are some elevated art form that like a game should strive to be like a movie. Like if you want to watch a movie, you should just go watch a movie. But this game has, I think video games have a reputation for storyline taking a bit of a back seat, because games are more about playing than like experiencing a story. But I think The Last of Us really made the story the centerpiece of it, and it did it so well. And it's so emotional. You play as Joel, who is sort of a father-like figure, but he is not a father, because spoilers, in like the first 10 minutes of this game, his daughter dies. But he sort of, like 20 years after this attack, this like zombie fungus thing has gone around and turned people into zombies. The world is kind of in shambles, and it's like a post-apocalyptic kind of thing. But he meets a girl named Ellie who needs to get to a place. And so he's kind of like, people are like, hey, if you get her to this place, we'll give you some money or something like that. He's sort of convinced begrudgingly to like get this girl to this place. And along the way, they sort of find out that she's been infected by the fungus, but she hasn't changed. And usually it takes like a couple days for people to change into zombies, and it's been like weeks and she hasn't changed. And so they think she's immune to it, and they need to get her to this other place so that they can maybe start to extract a cure. from her. And so that's what the story is about. And it becomes the story of Joel and Ellie becoming incredibly close, like a father-daughter, because she's like 14 or something and he's like 50. And there's like a father-daughter relationship that happens there. And by the end, you're so attached to these characters that like if anything bad happens to them, it's like it just feels so bad in a good way, like I feel bad because I am so attached to these characters. Anyway, if you haven't played The Last of Us, it's not super long. It's like probably 12, maybe 15 hours long, but it is really a masterpiece and should definitely be played. Also is on PlayStation 4, a better graphics, higher frame rate. Just play it there if you can, but it came out first on the PlayStation 3 and man, it is a wonderful, wonderful game. And the second one comes out soon-ish.
Yeah, I was trying to find a release date on that. Couldn't find one.
Yeah, it has a trailer that's out now and stuff like that, but it looks cool. So anyway, Last of Us, super worth playing. If you haven't played it, highly recommend it.
All right. Heavy Rain.
Heavy Rain. Are you familiar with Heavy Rain at all?
I'm kind of familiar with this guy's, David Cage's games.
Yeah.
They're like cinematic movies, like storytelling, branching stories, right?
Yeah.
Like it's...
Yeah, so Heavy Rain was it wasn't his first attempt at doing this sort of storyline driven game. He did a game for the in the PlayStation 2 era. I think it was on a bunch of different consoles and on PC. It was called Indigo Prophecy or Fahrenheit in regions that are not North America. So he kind of had already done this before, but Heavy Rain was hyped up a lot because it was a PlayStation exclusive. So Sony really put a lot of marketing muscle behind it. And it also they were really playing up the graphics and that it was a different kind of game. In that it was definitely heavily focused on the story, sort of like Last of Us, but it was almost more like a playable movie and less like a game with an awesome storyline. Like, so you could make some meaningful choices that would change how the story went, but a lot of what you were doing was just pushing buttons during cutscenes. But the storyline is basically you play as most of the time you play as Ethan, and you're a dad, and you lose your sons go missing. And you later find out that there's this like killer on the loose and he's like kidnapping small children and like putting them in like the idea is he's put them in this like gutter and the gutter is going to fill up with rainwater because it's been raining super heavily for the past few days. So like you have a limited amount of time to save these kids before the rainwater gets too high in the gutter. And so a lot of different things can happen because depending on how well you do in the various trials, like different characters can die and that changes the story. They don't just like die and you start over. It like actually changes a lot of stuff. It's a pretty cool, it's like a neat little mystery. I do remember feeling bamboozled by sort of the reveal at the end of who the killer is. Cause I think it's hard to explain without like explaining the actual thing that happens. And I don't want to spoil it because it is worth playing, but I did feel a little bamboozled. I was like, this doesn't feel great, but anyway, it's good. Super worth playing.
If you're into getting bamboozled, check out Heavy Rain.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it's not worth playing and it's not very long. It's probably 4 or 5 hours long. So you can play through it a couple of different times.
That's not bad at all. Yeah.
David Cage made another game for the PlayStation 3. I should say Heavy Rain is also on PlayStation 4, so play it there if you can. Beyond Two Souls is the other game that he made, and this is a similar style of game to Heavy Rain, but it focused a lot on, so the storyline is a big focus, but one of the things they added here was they made a big deal out of getting a couple of like big name actors. They got Ellen Page and Willem Dafoe. And they didn't just get them to do the voices of characters, because like famous Hollywood actors had done the voices of characters in games before. But Ellen Page and Willem Dafoe also did all of the motion capture for the cutscenes, and their likenesses were used. So when you're playing this game, you are watching Ellen Page and Willem Dafoe like do the things that they're doing. And so the storyline, I can't remember it. I don't remember it super clearly, but the storyline centers around the girl who has like a paranormal connection to like this spirit named Aiden. And Willem Dafoe is like kind of the like, I don't know if he's a doctor or something, but he's kind of helping her get through this. And so it's a lot of like smaller sort of vignettes of story, like times in the girl's life. Gosh, I wish I could remember her name. But they take place in different timelines. So there's like a lot of like, this thing happened 20 years in the future and this thing happened 15 years in the past. And so there's a lot of like, you kind of have to mentally map out the timeline yourself. I think there is a mode now they added later where you can play it in chronological order. So maybe it makes more sense when you do that. But it's definitely really weird. It's not, it tries to do a lot more than Heavy Rain did, which I admire and appreciate. I think it ultimately ended up not being quite as good as Heavy Rain.
I feel like getting that balance right between good gameplay and good story, where you don't want to end up just like, I don't feel interested in playing a movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't sound fun to me.
Yeah, if you wanted to watch
you
a
gotta
movie,
give
you would
me
have just
enough
watched a
of it.
movie.
Exactly. You got to give me some more game stuff. And this seems like it might be more on the movie side of things than
So
game.
we should probably get rolling through these other ones. Journey. Did you play Journey? Oh my gosh, if you didn't play Journey.
I never played Journey, but man, I know it's beautiful and I know it's a game I want to play. I'm really tempted because getting a PlayStation 4 means I could play a lot of these games still, because there are a lot of remakes and stuff.
Yes.
So
you definitely could. Journey is awesome. It's like one of the most beautiful games I've ever played, just like graphically, like art style wise. It's so awesome. You play as this like spirit thingy. I ended up just calling him Scarfy because he has a super long scarf, and the scarf is like kind of how you measure like your health in the game. But your goal is to like kind of get to the top of this mountain, and I can't remember exactly why, but you're on this journey and you're alone, except for other Scarfies can show up and like sort of help you. And it becomes pretty quickly apparent, I think, that these other Scarfies that show up are other people who are playing the game at the same time, and they just drop into your game like seamlessly. Like there's no like matchmaking, there's no like click connect and like play. That just other people show up in your game, and they can communicate only by this like pinging system where it's just like you just ping on top of your head. Like I don't mean ping like in Apex where you have all these different cool things you can do. It was really just like it makes your head ring. And so people can help you through stuff. They can travel with you, and it feels really cool. And they sort of drift in and out seamlessly. And you'll drift in and out of other people's games seamlessly. And it's very, very beautiful, and it's not very long. It's like maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours long. But by the end, after all is said and done, and it's a very beautiful ending, in the credits, it will tell you the PlayStation like IDs of everybody who is in your game. So it'll be like, you were helped by these. Like I was like 7 or 8 people that helped me when I played it the first time. And I was like, oh, wow, I kind of thought I just played through this whole game with the same person. Yeah, it was really neat. And like, you don't know their name when you're playing with them as you're going. So it's like this very like, you know, it's another person, but because you don't really have an effective way to communicate with them, you're forced to just assume the best of them. And just that they want to help because they don't really gain anything out of not helping you. Like they can't be mean to you in any way. So it's like, it was really cool. And it's also on PlayStation 4. So just play it. It's great.
check that out.
It's only a couple hours long. I want to touch briefly on Ni no Kuni, which was a neat JRPG that I don't think it's exclusive anymore. I think it ended up coming out on PC right before the second one came out. But this game was made partly by Studio Ghibli. Is that how you say it? Ghibli? Studio Ghibli?
I think I would go Ghibli because it's GH, but I think it's Ghibli.
Yeah, Studio Ghibli.
I think.
So it's like super cute and fun. That's the anime studio that made movies like My Neighbor Totoro and Kiki's Delivery Service and other movies like that that are all very cute and like fun and just like sort of meaningful. But they worked on this game. And so it feels like playing a Studio Ghibli movie. And it has some like, the gameplay is like kind of standard sort of action-y JRPG, but it has some real good Pokemon vibes, like catching monsters and stuff. So that's worth playing. It's pretty long. It's a typical JRPG, but I really...
Big fan of catching monsters, this guy.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll check that out on PC.
Yeah. God of War 3, which was, I think there was only 2 God of War games on the PlayStation 3. There was God of War 3, and then I want to say the other one was called Ascension. So God of War 3, I've never really been into the God of War series, but this was its PlayStation 3 debut. So I just remember feeling that this game was just huge and massive. I think this is the one where you fight the actual Titans. Because like I think in the first God of War, you kill the God of War, and then the second one, you kill other gods, and then so the third one was what's left, but the Titans. So I think you got to kill the Titans in the third one, which is pretty neat. I just remember.
Yeah, and then the fourth one, you get to be a dad.
Yeah, the one that just came out a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Dad of War. It's after he's killed all of the Greek gods and all of the Titans, and so now what do you got to do? You got to move on to the Norse gods. We're going to the Snowlands. Let's go, son.
He will go through his biggest challenge yet, parenting. That's like if it was like a comedy, that's what they'd go with.
Dad of War.
Dad of War.
So the last game that I want to talk about that's like a PlayStation 3 exclusive that I want to touch on, that it wasn't a very good game, but I remember it being like this was during the period of time where everybody was trying to make a Halo killer. And so when Killzone didn't quite do it, Sony really hyped up this game called Haze, that was made by the same folks who made the Time Splitters series. So it's Free Radical Design. Time Splitters games are really, really fun games. So this was made by them. So it was like, we got another shooter that's made by the Time Splitters people. Side note, Free Radical Design is made up of a lot of ex-Rare employees. So it was a lot of the people that had worked on GoldenEye and Perfect Dark also. So they made GoldenEye, Perfect Dark. They made the Time Splitters series. These guys, they had a good pedigree, you know? It was like, so Haze was probably a pretty safe bet. But it ended up just not being very good. It was about future soldiers who like take drugs that make them smarter, better, faster, stronger, but they also hallucinate in a way that like makes them not feel like they're fighting on a battlefield, I guess. Which is like kind of an interesting idea, but the game just wasn't very good. So after it didn't do very well, Free Radical got bought by Crytek. So they became Crytek UK, where they made Crysis 2 and 3, which were okay first-person shooters. So I'm glad they didn't give up, you know?
Yeah, never give up, never surrender.
That's right. I had a box of mints, Haze mints that I had gotten at PAX that year. So that was cool. They really pushed. Yes, I did. They really pushed Haze.
Did they have a hallucinogenic effect?
I don't remember. So probably.
Sorry to cut you off, but that was important to mention. I don't want you tripping out on your Haze mints.
Yeah, on my Haze mints. So, so that's the games for the PlayStation 3 that were like exclusive games that we felt were like worth talking about and important to the PlayStation 3. One last thing that I want to talk about that I think is important to the PlayStation 3 is the PlayStation 3 got a lot of PS2 remakes. So like they had a Ratchet and Clank collection with the first 3 Ratchet and Clank games. They had a Jak and Daxter collection with the first 3 Jak and Daxter games. Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 were released separately from each other because they each had other Kingdom Hearts games released with them as well. So you could play Rechain of Memories with Kingdom Hearts 1, and you could play Birth by Sleep with Kingdom Hearts 2. Eco and Shadow of the Colossus got remade. And these are like, when I say remade, I don't mean like the new Shadow of the Colossus remake where they basically did the game again. I mean, they took the PS2 version, they made it widescreen, and they upped the resolution, and they called it a day. So Eco and Shadow of the Colossus got it. God of War 1 and 2 got it. Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2 kind of got it. The Splinter Cell HD Remake Collection, which is not great, of the first 3 Splinter Cell games. Hitman, Metal Gear Solid. That's the best way to play those games, play their remake. Actually, the best way to play them is to play the Metal Gear Solid HD Collection on an Xbox One X. That's the best way to play those. And then also the Sly Cooper games got remade as well. So those are all together like really good packs and like reasons to get a PS3 because you can play all these awesome PS2 games in the best way to play them. So yeah, man.
Yeah, how do you feel about, instead of having backwards compatibility, doing these remakes like this? How do you feel about that?
It's tough because I love backwards compatibility. I love being able to play old games on new systems. I also like when they take the time to up-res a game. Like even these games that are like a resolution increase, maybe a frame rate increase, they made them widescreen. I really appreciate that too. I kind of wish they had both because like if I could play Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 on my PlayStation 3 that didn't have backward compatibility, that's cool, but it was actually still worth buying the HD remakes because they definitely looked better, they ran better, they had more kind of extra stuff in them too. So like I kind of would hope for both. If the reason they took backward compatibility out of the PlayStation 3 was because they wanted to sell more of these, that's kind of a bummer, but I don't know if that's why they did it or not.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm like, I love remakes. I think that's cool, but at the same time, people should be able to play the games they already own on the new systems.
Yeah,
I think I'm pretty solid in that position. You know?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there is also a case to be made that's like, well, it's not like your PlayStation 3 broke when you bought a PS4. You can still play your PS3 games on your PS3.
That's true. You know, you have the system still.
Yeah.
So, unless you got Yellow Light of Death.
Yellow Light of Death, and then, well, that sucks.
Yep. So, Tyler, what you been playing?
I've been playing the Division 2 beta this weekend, and it is okay. It's hard to get a feel. It's beta, which should mean that it's incomplete, but I think it's pretty close to being finished. I think demo is probably more accurate. it's hard to say for a game like that is designed to be played over a long period of time. Like, just having spent a weekend with it, like, the shooting feels okay, I guess. The guns are neat. There's a lot of gear and there's a lot of stats, which I appreciate in like an MMO style, like a game with MMO trappings. I really like stats. I think Destiny could use a bit more of that kind of stuff, of just like stat boosts, rather than just kind of a singular number that is your power level. But Division 2 feels okay. I played through, there's like a couple of missions they give you in the beta. I haven't done the end game stuff. They added some end games. So after you beat the first couple missions in the beta, they're like, okay, now you can go to end game. We'll give you a max level character and you can do the stuff that you'll be doing most of the time when you play this game that's not story missions. So I haven't checked that stuff out yet, but it feels okay. I'll play it when it comes out, but I'm not sure if it's going to take the place of Destiny, which I think is kind of the slot that they're going for when they make a game like that. They're like, we want to be the game that you come back to every week. And I'm not sure it's going to have that kind of staying power, but I'll check it out. Other than that, I've been watching Kelly play Kingdom Hearts 3, and that's pretty much it. What have you been playing, Mike?
I have been playing the new Super Mario Brothers on my 2DS a lot because I've been traveling a lot, I've been gone a lot, and then a lot of Apex Legends when I'm home.
Yeah?
Just with my friends, because I think that's what is appealing to me about Battle Royale games, is the lack of loyalty I need to have towards it.
Yeah.
Like, I can just play it, pick it up, drop it, like play it again. Like, I don't feel like I have to do something. They did this thing with Battlefield 5 where they have these weekly events and you unlock guns, and I don't like it because it's like you're making this feel like work.
Yeah.
You're not making it feel like a game anymore. And this is their way of like bringing you into the game, but the game Battlefield 5 has been nothing but a disappointment to me, Tyler.
I'm so sorry.
I'm realizing that now. And I thought it was fun. The war stories were good. It shouldn't. You know what? That's hyperbole. The war stories were fun. I had a good time playing those like single player things. But the whole point of Battlefield is to be a multiplayer, and I feel like they really whiffed. You know, they just swing and a miss.
Dang, man.
And I'm hoping it gets better, because that's a tendency with Battlefield games, is they get better. You know, Battlefield 1 had some problems up top, not nearly as bad as this, but they're really scrambling for stuff, and the main problems with the game, the bugs, aren't fixed.
Yeah.
You know,
they got a Battle Royale mode coming out soon, too.
Yeah, which I'm wondering, it was supposed to come out in March of 2019, and we haven't heard anything about it. So.
That'll be interesting, because EA has significant like reason to not put that mode in the game, because they don't want to compete with Apex, which is also EA.
Exactly. And I'm a little upset, because I'm a Battlefield fan. I think you are too.
Yeah, I like Battlefield.
Right? You're a fan. And I wanted to succeed, and then I'm just playing Apex as my first person shooter go-to. And then this week, Season of the Drifter starts in Destiny.
I haven't played any Destiny in a while, and I am so stoked for this Season of the Drifter stuff.
I soloed 2 or 3 Gambit matches on Friday when I heard the Season of the Drifter announcement. I got super amped for it. And then I was like, oh yeah, solo queuing Gambit's bad. All right, I'm going to leave. That's what ended up happening.
Yeah. It's not
I'm
Gambit Prime yet, is it?
The changes look pretty cool. I'm excited to play it with you, and it'll be a fun time.
Yeah.
And I think it looks really fun because we can just jump right into the activity. There's no like waiting.
Yeah.
It's like you just jump right into it.
It's going to be great. Yeah, Gambit Prime looks cool. And then there's like another mode that you...
I'm excited for that. And with that... we want to let you know that, as always, you can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Tyler's on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Also, I am on Twitter at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA. And we have a new review this week.
Yes.
And it's heartwarming. You ready for it, Tyler?
I'm ready for it.
This is from Darillo. It's 5 stars. I love listening to you guys with my 11-year-old daughter on the drive to school. For me, it's a trip down memory lane, and for my daughter, it opens her eyes to games she never played before. Thank you for giving me another thing I can bond with my daughter over. Thank you, Darillo, for causing my heart to melt in the middle of the day yesterday when I read that. You're the best, and I'm glad you're able to connect with your daughter about video games. That makes me feel good. That makes Tyler feel good, right? You feel great, Tyler.
I feel awesome.
And it filled my heart with joy, and it made me happy that we're doing this. And if you want to leave a rating and review like Darillo did, that would be awesome. But we are just so glad you're listening regardless. Tell your friends, all that jazz. Thank you so much. And Tyler, would you like to say goodbye to the listener?
Yes, I would like to say goodbye to you, our listener. Thank you, and goodbye.
This has been a Podaholics Comedy Network presentation. Podaholics.com